Hello, I'm Joan Weeks, and I'm here today with Paul Young. Now, Paul and I have known each other since the 1980s when I came to Sydney to work as a CBC reporter, and he was a technician in Master Control Radio. Now, over the years, Paul became very involved in the disability rights movement and was advocating for a better quality of life for people with disabilities. And he's now decided to donate his materials, his papers, his presentations to the Beaton Institute here at CBU. So we're doing this video interview just to provide a context for those materials. Hello, Paul.
Hi.
Maybe we'll start by, I'll start by getting you to tell me, why are you donating your materials to the Beaton Institute?
Well, I've been doing public speaking for over 25 years. And because of my personal story. And a lot of things have happened in that 25 years. And if I do say so myself, there's lessons to be learned about my life. And my immediate family never, ever found it interesting at all. And I didn't, quite honestly, I didn't want my material to be lost. And when you were thinking of writing my story, you gave me this idea, and I thought this would be a better way of telling my life story and people learning, because I love to teach. I love to tell people what to do, and so I thought, well, this would be perfect.
So let's go back, starting those lessons back in your early life. Tell me what it was like in school for you, what your capabilities were, your challenges, how you were treated.
Right. Well, before I do that, I got to get something right out there right away, because people will be wondering, well, what's your disability? My disability, I didn't know at the time, and we'll explain later, hopefully, is that I have cerebral palsy.
Okay, and was quite more severe back when you started school
than quite
now.
Yes, but that's what I am, not who I am.
Exactly.
And you were asking me about what was I like when I was a child, and how school was not very much of a help. Well, there was no supports for me. I couldn't see the blackboard, couldn't write things down quick enough. And so school was really, really difficult for me. And from North Sydney and being different than the other children my age, it was always pointed out to me that I was different, and particularly with my family. They always said, don't try too hard, don't play with the children that much, because you're not like them. It's basically the thought. Right?
So I've heard you talk before about the cocoon of impossibility. Can you explain what that is?
Well, years later, when I was doing this public speaking and telling my story about working, the great job I had, I realized at one of the colleges I was lecturing at that my childhood was like I was in a cocoon. I never did the typical things that a young person did. And so I came up with the idea of it's a cocoon of impossibility. And when people see the PowerPoint, they'll see a slide of a shadow within a cocoon, and on the outside, all the things that this shadow will never do.
So it made you feel like you couldn't do things, and you were treated like you couldn't do things, like you were in a cocoon.
Yes.
Yeah. So how did that leave you feeling about yourself and what you were capable of doing?
Well, it left me very upset inside because I wanted to be like everyone else. I wanted to do all the things that everybody else was doing, whatever age area I was in at the time. And it frustrated me very much, and never ever thought I could do anything, and didn't know what I was until we moved from North Sydney to Sydney, and Mother decided that, and with my support, I always listened to my mother, and I did what my mother told me to do. So I ended up in a segregated classroom at Argyle School in Sydney. And that's when I learned that I had a developmental disability. I had no idea about cerebral palsy. That's what I had. And this is my life from now on.
And what was the class called that you were in?
I apologize to people, but this is about history. So it was a class for retarded children.
So when you look back on all that now, how do you think you should have been treated, and what difference would it have made?
Well, I should have been treated like I think most people who were born with what I had now, back then, with teachers' aides or teachers' assistants. What's the program they have when you're early intervention? I didn't have any of that, because one of the earlier interventions might have helped is I might have been able to dress myself. Couldn't button a shirt until I was 9 years of age. Couldn't tie my shoes until I was 21. So that might have helped.
So after school, you finished your schooling, or you left school. Where did you go next, and what did you learn there?
Well, they were in the class in Argyle. They were looking for more space. And they decided that that it would be better for me to learn at home, and the assistant in the classroom would help me do that. And then they talked about starting a sheltered workshop or activity center. And the then Retarded Children's Association got together with the Kinsmen of Sydney and built an activity center, or started an activity center.
And how old were you at this point?
By this time, I was 19, going on 20, and so it started forming, and we had a meeting in early March of '64. I was 20, and it eventually, about the next couple of weeks, a couple of my classmates and a few others I didn't know started the workshop.
And what sort of things did you learn there?
Well, I learned how to sand wood. I learned how to paint. I learned how to what else? Glue furniture. Old chairs.
And was that because those were things that interested you?
No, that's because that's what they had planned for me. And the attitude over the years, I spent 12 years in that workshop. Over the years, the attitude was, well, this is what a person with a developmental disability can do. And it turned out to be as very, very mundane things.
While you were at the sheltered workshop, people there all had a chance to go to a summer camp near Amherst, and there was an incident that happened there that reflected attitudes at the time and reflected your thinking on yourself. You realized later. Tell me what happened at the summer camp.
Well, before I go to the summer camp, I wanted to tell you a bit of a background about it. You see, there's certain activities that people with developmental disabilities do. One, of course, is bowling, and other is swimming, and so the attitude is that these are the things that you can do because that's because of what you have. So we went to summer camp, and when you go to summer camp, you go there if you're 20 years of age or you're 65 years of age, you go to summer camp. And so when I was there and had a girlfriend in the workshop, which we broke up, and I was quite, at the time, very upset about that. And so I wanted she happened to go to camp too, and I wanted to show her how well I could still dance. And I'm dancing with one of the counselors at the camp. And the next counselor over, another woman counselor, dancing with another client. Oh, by the way, that's another label we have, we're clients, and campers. So she said to her, isn't this fun? It's almost like a real dance. And I never thought about it because the music was the same. I even remember the song that we were dancing to, but it was the same. So after years later when I was doing colleges and the young people were there, I thought of that comment and realized that and this is my opinion, the attitude was, well, we're going to give these people a life, but it's not going to be a real life because they really can't have a real life. And that's the attitude. And unfortunately, in my view, and people can get upset because all they want, I've lived it. And is that the attitude is that they'll never be able to do what we're doing.
Now, about this time, you went to Toronto to visit family, and you ended up attending an employment center or workshop there. And tell me what was important about what happened at that center.
Well, that was, at the time, again, not as important as I realized. But during my stay in the workshop in Sydney and in my own personal activities, I listened to a lot of music and particularly a lot of radio. And one of the most times I did that is when, as a young boy, I took seizures up until I was 11, and a family would put me in bed and turn the radio on. And I became very interested in the music of the day and radio itself, and had not very many friends that I could keep up to in that, and announcers became my friends. So
when you went to Toronto, you had this passion for music and radio.
Yes, and around the time I was had started in the Kinsman Activity Center, which was up over a music store, by the way, I followed the new radio station that came on the air because there was only two, CBI and CJCB, and then a station called Cheer came on the air. And I was excited because I thought they would start playing rock and roll. And, of course, they didn't. And I called them and tried to encourage them to do so. And that didn't work out, of course. So years later, I met an announcer. I was getting ready to go to one of the camps I usually go to in the summer, and got talking to him. He had worked at Cheer, and asked him how it was doing. And so, in other words, I was lobbying already to try to get into radio, and didn't realize it. He pointed out to me that really knew my stuff, and you should get a job in radio. So then one of my sisters was married in Toronto. My mother suggested that I would go out and give her a hand by visiting with her, and she worked, and I would do the look after the apartment and make sure everything that came in, the mail, whatever, was taken care of. So when I was staying with her, she said, "You ought to come up here and live, and go to the workshop up here." So we went down to this workshop in Toronto and made acquaintances. And next January in '76, I went up to stay in Toronto. And the way it worked was you went through different departments of the workshop, and there would be a social worker monitoring your progress and how you were feeling and blah, blah, blah. And so one day, my mother decided to come up and visit. I never went anywhere without my mother until then. And so I thought, well, I better ask. So I asked this gentleman, a social worker, what he thought of me getting a job in radio. And he said, well, you're not going to be ready for radio, for a job until maybe next September. This is March or April. And he said, but as far as you working in radio, you'll never be able to work in radio. So Mother and I really cared about each other so much we couldn't really say that. And so she said, well, it's up to you, Paul. Well, no, Mom, it's up to you. So I ended up coming back and going back to the workshop.
And between the Employment Center in Toronto and the workshop here, did you gain the skills you needed to get a job that you would have enjoyed?
No. Just something to say that I had a job or to pass the day away.
And at this time, did you have any kind of income? How were you supporting yourself?
Well, my parents got me a pension from probably social services at the time of about $65 a month. I was around, 18? And so that was the income I had. And, of course, my mother and father looking after me.
So because of your love of popular music and your passion for that, you continued to take the initiative to try and get a job at Cheer. And you met some people at Cheer who believed in you. What happened as a result?
What happened as a result is there was we had, for those who are around my age, we had a big storm in October of '74. It was a hurricane. And the next day I decided, without a jacket on, going around to see the damage. Got pneumonia, ended up in the hospital, and had been having nosebleeds for many years, and had made an appointment to see the ear, nose, and throat doctor about that. And when I'm in the hospital, he came in to do some errands or something, and happened to see me in bed, and he said, what are you doing here? And I told him, and he said, so yeah, we got an appointment next month or whatever it was. Anyway, I went to see him in the appointment. But before that, I met up at that announcer again. And remember what he said, and he said exactly this again. He said, you know your stuff. Supposing an empty a garbage can, you belong in radio. And I went to Dr. Mars about him taking Cheer Radio over. And his partner, Duncan McDonald. And he said, well, what do you think of the station? I said, Doctor, you need $1 million you don't care about. And first of all, you need some announcers. And you need to be playing adult contemporary music. And he said, what are you doing? I said, I'm at the Kinsman Workshop. And how much money you make there? I make 15 cents an hour. I said, how much? Find out from your mother how much money are you allowed to make before you lose your disability pension. We did. And months later, I walked in the Cheer and started being a record librarian, putting records on the shelf. And that's how I got into radio.
And you eventually met some people at CBC and had some opportunities there. But that was a full-time job, or that was a much better income. What decision did you have to make at Cheer and at CBC?
Well, I had to make the big decision that everybody after me, besides telling me what I wasn't, that I couldn't lose my pension, right? Dr. Marsh gave me the $24.86 wage a week, 14 cents for Canada pension, and I started learning. But I wasn't doing very well with the cataloging of new stuff. And so they started talking about a new studio. And before I tell you what I did about that new studio, there was one of the kinsmen was the chairman of the workshop committee, and he worked at CBC. So I called him, asked him if he would give me a tour of the station, so I could tell Dr. Marsh and others, what I think the library should look like. And I did that. And he invited me up again because he enjoyed my visit, and he said, come up in the evening. He worked in TV. And one evening of my visits, he took me downstairs to have a coffee. And he said to the gentleman sitting at the table eating lunch, he said, Walter, I want you to meet Paul. This is Paul Young. I said, hello, Walter. He said, I'm Walter Pretty. And you have a brother who works at the city hospital. I said, yes. He's doing very fine. My brother Raymond has a disability as well. I said, yes, he is. What are you doing? And I was quite frank with him. I said, I'm just hanging on by a thread down there at Cheer and told him what I was exactly doing. And I would like to learn how to transfer from reel to reel to cartridge commercials, national commercials, and help the guys out in production. He said, you come up and show me. I'll show you. And I did, and he showed me. And that got me into radio. Oh, and by the way, I did give up my pension at Cheer, and it was tough. But all they said to me is, thank you, and the next month my check was cut just like that.
But you ended up working at CBC full-time,
Yep.
and you say you went from being a client, which we mentioned earlier,
Yep.
to becoming a productive member of society. What did you mean by that?
Well, at least at that time, a productive member of Cheer Radio and CBI Radio, and I became an audio technician, and Walter Pretty, who was my mentor, I owe him my life because he changed my life forever. I should have been in Special Olympics longer than I was, but my life changed. And he showed me a lot of stuff. So I became a productive member. And what I mean by that, Joan, is that I had to record news items, news reports. And I have recorded many of yours. And I had to keep up to what was needed to me to produce that report. When the audio clip was supposed to be inserted, how high the level was on your mic and how high the level was on the cartridge, and when to put the next clip in and so on. Meaning that I only had about grade 5 or 6 reading ability at the time, so I was learning how to read by following the script and learning how to overcome my coordination problems by using the equipment. So the job was not only being productive, it was transforming me from the client with the developmental disability or cerebral palsy into an audio technician and working for the top broadcaster in the country.
And as everybody knows, radio has hard deadlines. You have a newscast at 4:30. You can't be kind and give someone extra time to finish the work. You had to
You have
meet
to do
deadlines.
it, and they can't be kind to me saying, oh, I'll wait for you to get that queued up now. That didn't happen. I had to have it queued up or I was in big trouble. And so, anyway.
So at CBC and later, you became very involved with the disability rights movement, advocating for people with disabilities, became head of People First Canada. What were you trying to teach people with all this work you were doing?
Well, I was learning myself about people's rights and about being a person with a disability. And so I went to a couple of meetings, but this particular meeting I met up with a gentleman who was a wheelchair user, and he got an apartment where my brother and I were living, and became quite acquainted with the issues of disability and what consumerism was and is. And he introduced me to a local group, Community Involvement of Disabled. whose biggest claim to fame, as far as I was concerned, was the elevators in the provincial building here in Sydney and handy trams bus service. That's the two biggest things that I remember. And, of course, wasn't meeting up to my own standards there, and heard about another advocacy group called People First. And People First were for people with developmental disabilities to speak on their own behalf, not just their parents' associations, but on their own behalf. And I joined that and became quite familiar with that, developed a provincial organization, became the chair of that, ended up in another committee to develop a National People First of Canada, and did that, and ended up as president of that. My mother told me one time, never to forget where you came from. And when I was successful in working at CHEER and then getting hired at CBC on a contract, I said, I just can't forget it. I have to tell people that don't understand why this happened for me. And especially tell them the way I was treated, with the attitude that this is not the real dance.
Why did you feel it's so important for people to know that?
So that other Paul Youngs, different names, but the same situation, can achieve whatever they want. Now, some people say, well, you were lucky and you weren't really you weren't diagnosed right. A radio technician, meaning, well, someone that gets a dishwashing job is successful. And I'm of the opinion that that's the lowest you can be. Right? If you want to, and you've got the right support and the right understanding from people, you'll do anything.
Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome.